Why, hello there. Sit, join me. Let's have a lovely discussion on sickle cell anemia. Did you know that about 1% of all the children born in sub-Saharan Africa are born with sickle cell anemia? Fascinating, isn't it? Especially in comparison to the, say, 0% that we see in Eastern Europe, Russia, Scandinavia, and pretty much all of Asia. Now, I'll get to why this is in a second, but first, do I come across as racist for discussing the prevalence of sickle cell anemia? Do I strike you as a bigot? Have I somehow implied that there's any kind of superiority, or dare I say supremacy, simply for these prevalences in population groups? You know, one of the most important words that I learnt in the English language was infer. I imply, you infer. In other words, if we were to have a discussion of the genetic statistics of certain population groups, and you might have certain preconceptions in your mind, and then you might infer something which wasn't actually there to begin with. It's like the story of the fish in the water, you know, the fish swimming through the water, another fish swims by and says, "Howdy fellas, how's the water today?" And the two fish are like, "What the fuck's water?" The left, by which I mean the extreme far left, which sadly, thanks to the modern Democrats on the western coast of America, have suddenly now made the extreme left the mainstream left. What can you do about it? The extreme left love to call these inferences dog whistles. Another one of their made-up propaganda words to, try and basically brainwash the entire population. Imaginary things that weren't really there to begin with, and of course, if everything is subconscious, then you can just make up whatever you want, can't you? And call everybody unconsciously racist, because if you're unconsciously racist, how can you ever know that you're racist? And so you can never be not racist. Funny how they just love to control people like that, isn't it? Really makes you think. Unlike the left, of course. What was I doing talking about sickle cell anemia? Oh, well, we'll get to that. So in sickle cell anemia, the red blood cells, they kind of get this bent, skinny shape, and it makes them look a little bit like sickles. You get it? Sickles? Because they are red blood cells, eh?
What a terrible performance. Get the hook. Get it?
Sickle cells, due to their odd shape, they can cause circulation problems. They can, build up and cause blockages. Kind of counterintuitive how the little skinny blood cells actually cause blockages, where the normal fat ass cells, they just do things normally. Kind of counterintuitive that way. So anyway, if you're a geneticist, you might wonder, well, why do these genes persist in the sub-Saharan Africa groups? Why are they there? Well, if you have sickle cell anemia, it's really, really hard for a certain parasite to infect those red blood cells, the little skinny ones. And if you live in an area that has high rates of malaria, then having sickle cell anemia suddenly becomes really advantageous to you in the sense of survival. And so it's really, really interesting the way that genetics work this way. Don't worry, I assure you, I have a point. It's kind of like an evolutionary barter system, if you will. So what the fuck am I talking about? What does this have to do with the race and genetics and IQ? How does this have anything to do with the title of the video? I'll get to it. I assure you I do have a point. With the sickle cell anemia example, is that there are multitudinous factors when it comes to things like genetics. Genetics are not simplistic, and of course the left like to make everything, they like to cut everything down. They like to burn books, they like to burn information, they like to cut out words from the language and make everything skin deep. Literally, like everything just has to be skin deep, or everything has to be a social construct. Genetics are not usually simplistic in nature, and yet the left, the extreme, lost its mind, left somewhere behind, must have put it in amongst the things putting out left. They just want to make everything as shallow as possible, as skin deep as possible, literally. And they refuse to acknowledge how potentially dangerous this is. Genetics are not simple, they're not simplistic, and we need to be able to talk about them. We can't just be like, no, you're not allowed to talk about that. Oh, that's offensive, or that's controversial. No, we gotta talk about this because it's not simple, it's complicated. We have to be allowed to talk about it. While there's no shortage of lefties ragging on like the flat earthers and the creationists and the anti-vaxxers, they can't realize that they are exactly the same. They deny science, they deny biology, they deny reality, and they won't allow people to discuss science. They won't allow people to discuss genetics. They won't allow people to discuss any of this. And so it's like, they don't realize that they are no different to the flat earthers or the creationists or any anti-science or science denier, anybody like that. They're no different. They can make fun of the creationists all they want, but they're no different. Anything that invalidates their belief about, white people all evil, brown people all fragile, basically, they won't listen to it because they only want to hear what they already believe. That's it. And yeah, that sounds kind of like a religion, doesn't it? Funny that. I'm not a biologist. I just took an interest, something that the left apparently is incapable of doing. Meanwhile, while they wag their finger at everybody and say, educate yourself, bigot, they won't educate themselves. They won't read anything. They won't even watch Fox News because, it might radicalize them. Well, maybe that would be a good thing. Now, I was fortunate enough many, many moons ago to sneak into some lectures at UCLA. This was a long time ago. And I was lucky enough to listen to Jay Phelan discussing life sciences. I sincerely hope that the life sciences in the universities of California are still as good as they were back then. I hope that they aren't all infected by the woke disease, because holy shit, those were really good lectures. They were great. The scientists and the professors of the life sciences departments in California haven't also buried their brains in shallow graves. That'd give me some hope, because they were good back then, yeah. We need to be able to talk openly, honestly, frankly about things like genetics. We just have to. If we can't, then we don't have the ability to do what I just did a moment ago with you, my lovely and very attractive viewer, when I just told you about sickle cell anemia. I wouldn't be able to do that if I wasn't allowed to talk openly about these things, because you can't say that the people in sub-Saharan Africa have higher rates of sickle cell anemia because that'd be racist. No, it's just a result of the fact that there's a benefit, an evolutionary benefit to having the sickle cell anemia. That's fascinating. That's interesting. That makes me excited about things like just life in general. Like, hey, that's cool. I want to learn about this stuff. It makes me passionate about it. And the left want to come along and burn that. It's like, no, won't let you.
Oh, all right. Burn it! Send it to hell!
But that's what the left wants. It wants to burn books. It wants to break up the races, segregate them, restore segregation, apparently, is what they like doing. Water fountain for the colors. How woke, how progressive. They want to delete words from the language. Everybody's familiar with Newspeak. And of course, they want to continue this myth that black people apparently have no responsibility or agency or power over their own lives.
No, but you had the complexion for the connection.
Wow, I was in some pretty hairy situations that I never ever paid the price for.
Never.
And you also had different violations. Tyshawn was dealing drugs at the time. Chelsea was not. Heroin, no less.
You were just trying to make money, and you were just trying to get ahead for your family. You would bring money home to
give it to my mom.
Yeah, you brought it to your mom all the time, but then you started doing the heroin. That was the
downfall.
Switchback. That was not the good move.
Yeah, actually doing the heroin, that was the downfall. But ruining other people's families to benefit yours, that I totally get. Where does this reasoning end?
And that's why they won't allow you to discuss any kind of genetics or statistical data when it comes to like women or black people, because apparently, oh, they're too fragile to deal with any kind of reality. In reality, that describes the left pretty well, doesn't it? They're too fragile to cope with reality. Well, they are masters of projection, aren't they? They just project their own insecurities onto literally the entire world. By the way, I just have to put this in here. The left have come full circle and they're just calling black people coloreds like in the 1950s. No, we're not calling them coloreds, we're calling them people of color, as if it makes any fucking difference. And there they go again, trying to warp the language, as if, oh, you warp the language and then it changes everything apparently. And they think that changing the language will stop us from seeing the evil that they're wreaking upon the world every single day. By the way, if you're getting a bit sick of all the 1984 and Orwell references, which are, let's face it, very relevant these days, I can recommend Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. It's an entire book about book burning, basically. Books are illegal in their society in this dystopian 24th century world because, a book is basically one individual sharing their information with you, personally. It's this personal thing, it's an individualistic thing. A book is inherently an individual thing, whereas the television, it's a corporate thing, it's a collectivist thing, it's a broadcasting thing, it's not narrowcasting. In the world of this dystopia that Bradbury had, books are illegal because that's independent thought. You have to watch the TV, you have to watch the mainstream media, and you have to get that mainstream narrative. And it's actually freakishly pertinent, I would say, to our current situation. Thank Christ it's not that bad, but, it is telling, shall I say?
Finally, do remember to tolerate your friends' friends, however alien and peculiar they may seem to you. Don't.
Doesn't Cousin Midge's face look swollen?
Well,
that's because she's pregnant.
Is that
why? I think it's irresponsible. To have children, I mean.
Well, somebody's got to have children, Jackie. We can't let the race die out.
Babies grow up to look like you. That must be fun.
Mother malice, strangle violence, suppress prejudice.
Oh, here's Montag.
Be tolerant today.
Come on over and sit with us. Look, you haven't seen Jackie and Doris and Helen for ages. It's very rude, you know.
Leave me alone.
Aren't you well? All right. But it's very naughty.
123 have finished their course and been reclassified. 2 cells of antisocials were located earlier today in the Western metropolitan area. The police have declined to comment so far. Meanwhile, the Report Those Who Threaten You campaign met with particular success today.
When an old woman, cousins, chose to be burned with her books rather than being separated from them.
If that's a joke, it's not in very good taste.
You would like to think that, wouldn't you?
Don't be silly, Montag. Things like that don't happen.
You mean you don't want to hear about it? I saw it.
Well, my husband says that...
Oh, your husband. You don't even know where he is, your husband.
Montag! Of course I know. He's been called on reserve for some field training.
Or to fight a little war, perhaps. You never know, do you?
Why'd you call it that?
Well, even if he was, what about it? He's not allowed to call me till it's all over. It'll only be about a week or 2.
Anyway, he'll be all right. Point about wars is, if you want to call them that. It's only other women's husbands who get killed in them.
That's true. I never knew anyone who got killed in a... Not anyone whose husband died like that. Getting run over, jumping out of a window, yes. Like Gloria's husband a few nights ago. But never that other way. Anyway, that's life, isn't it?
That's what you call it. You're nothing but zombies, all of you. Sit down, come on, sit down. It will only take a minute.
Whatever's that? Darling.
It's not a book.
That's what it is, it's a novel.
Oh, but a book? Oh, you mustn't. It's against the law.
Quiet, sit down and listen. My pretty Dora. We thought she would be running about as she used to do in a few days. But they say to wait a few days more, and then wait a few days more, and still she neither ran nor walked. I began to carry her downstairs every morning and upstairs every night. But sometimes when I took her up and felt that she was lighter in my arms, a dead blank feeling came upon me, as if I were approaching to some frozen region, yet unseen, that numbed my life. I avoided the recognition of this feeling by any name or by any communing with myself until one night, when it was very strong upon me, and my aunt had left her with a parting cry, "Oh, goodbye, little Blossom." I sat down at my desk alone and cried to think of what a fatal name it was, and how the blossom withered in its bloom up in the tree.
I knew that's what would happen. It's what I've always said. Life isn't like novels. Novels and tears, novels and suicide. Novels are sick. That was sheer cruelty, Montag. You're a cruel man.
All those words, idiotic words. Evil words that hurt people. Isn't there enough trouble as it is? Why disturb people with that sort of filth?
Poor Doris.
Bye, Linda. We were having such a nice party. Such a shame.
I can't. I don't know those feelings. I'd forgotten all about those things.
Oh, I'm sorry, Doris.
He won't come back. I'll be all alone. I won't be popular anymore. They won't use me in the family anymore.
And you made Doris cry.
She cried because it is true.
What are you going to do now? Haven't you done enough harm already?
Leave me alone, Linda. I've got reading to do, quite a lot.
What's the matter with you? Aren't you well?
It's nothing. I've got to read. I've got to catch up with the remembrance of the past.
And this, of course, finally brings me to what I think is really responsible for intelligence disparities, at least in the West. It's culture. What do I mean by that? Well, I've spoken with black people who say that when they said to their families and friends that they wanted to go to university, that they were shunned, they were shamed, they were told that they were like a traitor, basically, a race traitor, because, oh, going to university, oh, that's a white folk thing. Why do you want to do that? You know, why do you want to be like them, basically? And again, it's the left trying to segregate people, trying to separate them, trying to sow division amongst people. It's shameful, it's horrifying, it's inexcusable, and at least I'm glad that people are waking up to this shit. They're waking up from being woke, and they're not putting up with it. Like, I'm not going to censor my videos simply because YouTube wants me to. YouTube can go to hell. I won't censor what I want to say. I'll swear as much as I want because, you know what, I don't care about money. I've been poor my whole life. I've never been rich. I've never had money. I don't care. You know, I've been very fortunate to get help from a lot of charities, and that is why I'm a libertarian, because the welfare system is incredibly broken. I've said this before. It locks people into a poverty cycle, and again, I blame the left and I blame the Democrats. They want this. They want blacks to be perpetual victims. Like, they'll give you these benefits, but they won't teach you how to save. I had charities actually teach me how to save money and to budget and put money away, and they'd always say it's pay yourself first. You get money, put your savings aside, like whatever it is, 10% or whatever. Put that aside in the bank first. Then you go pay your bills. And you make sure that you have everything, and you forego luxuries. I don't need a flat screen TV. I don't need fancy stuff. Be a smart shopper. I buy my clothes on eBay. I buy my jewelry on eBay because it's cheap. I know it comes from China, and I feel bad about the fucking sweatshops and, you know, slaves basically over there. But it's like, well, you know, I'm just trying to take care of my own family. That's basically the best I can do. It's like they say, charity begins at home, doesn't it? Falling down. You know, this is what you need in these communities. You need somebody to come in and basically say, look, here's how we can get you out of poverty. Here's the things we can do to make sure that your descendants are not poorer than you. We're going to make them wealthier than you. You know, you might not be in the top 1%, you might not have a solid gold toilet, but you will be living comfortably and you will be happy and prosperous because we live in a beautiful capitalist world, for the time being at least, And we can do that. We can get these beautiful things even when we are poor. We can build and we can get to a better place. Socialism and communism, they don't allow that. And I mean, that's the attitude of the left. It wants to teach women and minorities, you're a victim forever. You're a perpetual victim. You will never succeed because, oh, it's a white man's world and you are forever under their iron boot. No. What you want is to put us under your boot. You want to put us under the left's boot. The left boot. This is why I kept moving to the right the older I got. Because the whole attitude of the left is oh yeah, well, you're just a poor victim and you're always going to be that way. And the attitude of the right is very empowering. It's like, no, you can take responsibility for this. And like I said, that's the attitude of the charities that helped me out. Like when I was homeless as a teenager and I lived in shelters, and they taught me how to do resumes. They taught me how to dress for a job interview. They gave me practice interviews so I could talk, you know, and they gave me confidence. What did the government ever do? These were private charities. They didn't make any money from the government. They made their money from private donors. They were the whole, like, the shelter I was in, the little share house that they eventually moved me into to get out of the homeless shelter. Privately run, private charities. And they taught you how to do stuff like that. They taught you how to bank, they taught you how to budget, and they actually gave you this confidence, whereas the government doesn't do anything like that. The government just says, okay, here's your stipend, and now fuck off. Or rack off, as my mother would say. I don't want that attitude of just like, here's your fish, now go away. I want the person that's going to be like, hey, here's my fishing rod, I'll loan it to you, and you can catch some fish, and then when you've earned enough money from your fish, you can buy your own rod and then give me my rod back. You know, that's the attitude of the private charities, and they work fine. Now, I'm veering off a lot of the topic of this video, but I like my tangents. I like to smell the roses and go down the garden path. I enjoy that, so my apologies. But this cultural attitude, that's why we see these IQ gaps and these intelligence gaps, these disparities amongst race. I mean, why do you think that Asians are always ranked higher in intelligence than white people? It's because the cultural attitudes of Asians is to be like, you know, grades and education are super, super important, whereas, you know, these are all broad statistics, and that's the point, is like, how can statistics be racist? It's stupid to accuse the statistics of being racist. The statistics are just looking at what's there. It's not making any judgment, you know? That's the point. I'm just looking at what's there and observing it. I'm not making any call on whether this is good or bad. And as I pointed out, even if IQ were genetic, or even if it is genetic, and I'm sure there is a small genetic component, I just don't think it's the major factor in why we see these gaps. It is what it is, isn't it? Again, like I said, I'm just making observations. I'm not making any judgment. But the left want to say, like, oh, how dare you say that? You're not allowed to say that. We have to burn this book. We have to burn you. We have to burn what you say. Goodbye. You're not allowed to have an opinion. And I won't put up with it. I just won't. I won't put up with being told that I can't have a voice or that I can't observe reality. It's not even about having an opinion anymore. It's about just pointing out what's there. People getting fucking suspended from school because they say there's only 2 genders. Are you kidding me? What next? Saying that, hey, look, the sky, it's blue. Out with you, get out, you're not allowed in this university anymore. How dare you point out reality? Like, you know, I'm not the only one that just feels like I'm going insane. I'm in a dream world, and any second I'm gonna wake up. The only thing that keeps me sane actually is Trump, because he's like a beacon of like reality, like of just sanity in a completely insane world. And so it makes sense that all the crazy media and everything, they just go nuts. They've got Trump derangement syndrome. They've gone nuts because it's like they don't want him shoving reality in their face, basically. It makes them uncomfortable, so they don't like it. And they're just trying to project their own insecurities onto him and everybody else. It's a little embarrassing, but, you know, we come to expect embarrassing from the left now, haven't we? They have the power to change. They have the power to be better people. They have the power to improve their lives. They have the power to not be such assholes. Are they going to do that? Are they going to fix their lives? Are they going to take responsibility? Are they going to confront their own flaws and realize, like, maybe the problem isn't with everybody else. Maybe the problem is actually with me or my worldview. It's just like, how do you get the fish to realize it's swimming in water? We've tried talking to them. They don't like it. So I mentioned the need to discuss openly and honestly genetics. We need to be able to talk about IQ, we need to be able to talk about race, and we need to be able to talk about it just in an honest way, like just observing reality. We don't have to make judgments on it, but if we want to, we need to be able to do that. And it is the same thing that I was talking about with Fahrenheit 451, because if we can't share this knowledge, then we lose it. It becomes lost to the ages. We can't let that happen. We need to pass down everything. The stories, you know, the mythologies, the folk songs, everything, the fairy tales. We need to be able to pass down both the life stories and the life sciences. That's why, like, you know, I just say every day, you know, don't be afraid of putting yourself out there or your opinions out there, because we need that. We can't lose this stuff. We can't lose independent thought, individual thought. And there is no shame in just observing reality, observing a trend. And as I pointed out with the sickle cell anemia, genetics are not simple. You know, if there is a genetic component to race, that's not necessarily pointing out some kind of inferiority. It may be like with the resistance to malaria in sickle cell anemia. It may be simply because whatever gene influenced that effect was somehow beneficial to the survival of that population group due to whatever they were dealing with when those genes propagated. Genetics are not skin deep. That the left want everything to be skin deep. The left want everything to be about race. They want everything to be about your fucking vagina or your dick. I'm not putting up with it. I may just be one little, like, message in a bottle floating on a sea of messages in bottles. Cue the police music. But that's what you've got to do. You got to put your message in the bottle out there. Because we can't let them burn these books. We can't let them burn us. Because that's where it's headed. That's where it will end up.
Let sleeping dogs lie. I say, no! And you know what sleeping dogs I'm referring to, don't you? No? Well, let me refresh your memory. Russians. That's right. Russians, Ruskies, communists. Communists. Oh, now you remember. Well, do you also remember how a few years ago all we ever talked about was how the Russians were going to take over the world, and how every household would be run by communists and their filthy communism? Oh, yeah, we feared the Russians back in them days, and for good reason, too. But now all I ever hear is, poor little Russia, they've got no money. Poor little Russia, they've gone broke. Poor little Russia this, and poor little Russia that. Don't you get it? Am I the only one that gets it? It's a trick. Communism never dies. Communism is a cancer sleeping, awaiting the moment to devour our freedom, to devour democracy. Oh, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this guy's just some right-wing paranoid reactionary who had a horrible upbringing and whose father beat him every day with a Bible. Well, maybe that's true, but it never did me any harm. All I'm saying is, a few years ago, people used to listen to me. I fit in. Well, listen to me now. The Russians, they're going to try to take over the world again. Don't you forget that for 1 second, friend, or else you'll find yourself lining up for toilet paper in some godless world. There's one more thing I'd like to say. Killer bees. Forgot about them, didn't you?